you have almost no chance, right? You have almost no chance to recover in a trade that has only 3 days until expiration for a couple of reasons. Number one, your T plus zero is going to be, it's going to, the first thing I'm going to say is that your structure is going to be set up a lot closer to at the money with only 3 days. And we can look at something like this with only 3 days, or, I say 3 days, it could be 5 days, it could be 7 days, but on a shorter term or shorter time frame, right? Similar structure is going to be much closer to at the money, which means that you are going to be exposed to a lot more directional risk. And if you're caught in a -2, -3%, even maybe -1% down day, it's a very difficult trade to hold, and it will require a lot more attention. And, this is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. I'd like to have a trade that only takes, maybe check in on it once a day. Look at it sometime in the afternoon, maybe, 2 o'clock Eastern, maybe 3 o'clock, an hour before the market close, just to get an idea of, okay, or maybe it's at 3:30, right? So between 3 and 4 is where the institutional players come in to square off their books for the day. And, that's where we get a lot of volume and liquidity and all that stuff. So maybe between 3 and 4, you check in and you see, look, if the trade is close to getting into trouble, and you'll know when it's close to getting into trouble, maybe you'll make whatever adjustment you need to make, right? And then go about your day. But if you're trading something with, here's one, 5 days until expiration. And I'm going to try to model similar trade. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to exactly, because, 150 points wide by 100 point wide put debit spread on such a short time frame. Let's see what that would look like. So maybe we'll use 5870 as the center of the structure. So then we go from 5870, we go 150 points lower. So that's 5720. Right, so we'll buy a wing at 5720, and then we'll need to go 100 points above 5870. That's 5970. All right. Right, so the structure doesn't look as great. You cannot get, I made a mistake. 5970. No, that's right. Yeah, it's terrible looking, right? And it takes a lot more margin, and you have risk both on the upside and on the downside. So you would not go 150 by 100. You would probably have to keep your wings much closer. Let's see what that looks like. Right. So if we go 5780 on the downside, and maybe 5920. Right. So that's a little bit more like it, and still not quite. You'll have to start to roll the wings in. This is kind of right similar. So if we want to try to keep our risk down to, and this is per one lot, down to around $5,000. Right. So this is under a $5,000 risk with a credit up front. Maybe we can roll the downside wing 10 points. So now it's $4,500 risk minus the credit of 110. Right. So that's kind of what this trade would look like. Right. So now if you're caught in a minus, 2.5%, 3% down day, right? You just go 1 day forward, minus 3%, right? will put us at around, I don't know, 57.40 maybe. This trade is down 70% on margin. You lose 70% of your Reg T margin. Right? So the trade that has very little time until expiration, yes, it has a lot more theta, right? You only have to wait 5 days to get the outcome. But if you're caught in one of those big down days, it's very hard to recover from being down 70% in a trade like this. Right? Because if you think about it, how much are you going to make on your average winning trade? I don't know, 3%, 5%, right? If you're down 70% on a bad trade, how many winning trades do you need to get to break even? Right? This trade will almost have no chance. And I'm not making the case that this trade does not work on the shorter time frame. What I'm saying is that the closer you are until expiration, right, the more risk you're taking on with this trade. This trade could, I mean, I know that we have some traders in our group that set up this trade with 21 DTE or something like that. And, you know, with 21 DTE, you'll get to place your structure farther out of the money, not as far as you would if you were trading this one with 75 days or something like that. Right. But 21 DTE trade is going to decay much faster. So you'll get the result a lot sooner, and you can obviously do about 3 cycles of 21 DTE by the time I finish one cycle of 70 or 72 DTE. Right. So you get to turn over your buying power more frequently with shorter duration, which could potentially yield more dollars as far as P&L goes, but you're also going to be taking more risk because with shorter duration, you're placing the trade closer at the money. You may not be able to defend the position if something happens in the near term. So there's some, risks and some benefits. I think the best advice for everyone is to find what works best for you. If you're a lot more active, if you're a lot more aggressive, you can trade this, with 28 DTE and maybe take it off at 14 DTE. So you have that 14, so you have 2 week window to kind of get the result, right? But you will have to, I don't think you can get away with just looking at this trade once a day and, going on about your business. You would have to be looking at this trade. You look at it in the morning when the market opens. You kind of want to see, what happens in the afternoon. And you'll probably hit your profit target a lot sooner, right? You don't have to wait as long, but you are going to be exposed to a lot more risk in the near term. So here's where we are on the most recent trade. Right, I put this trade on and I have done nothing to it just yet. My number one goal is to give this trade first 30 days, right? I started this trade 5 days ago. Now this trade has 72 days left, which means I started this trade with about 77 DTE. I'm going to give this trade first 30 days. Again, assuming that we're not inside the structure where my stop would have to be. If we're still hanging around somewhere, anywhere above my upper long put, which is at 57.50, if we're anywhere above 57.50 in the first 30 days, there's a good chance that I may hit my target. And that's where I get out. I can also, and this is, something that I think everyone should do, right? I set a price alert on SPX, 57.50 for this trade, right? And you can leave a note or a comment on that alert. So when you get the alert, if you're setting up multiple alerts and, you got 3 alerts, you kind of want to know, why you're getting these alerts. So in the notes or in the comments of that alert, you can, give yourself instructions. For example, if I was to set up a price alert in the Thinkorswim for 57.50, right? This is where we are approaching the structure, and hey, it's time to check in on trade number 3086. Right. That's if you don't want to look at the trade every single day. You kind of put it on, you put your alert, and you say, you know what, I'm gonna, go on about my business, and I'll check back either 30 days from now or when I get alerted at whatever price level. Right. So it's very hands off. You don't have to worry too much about this trade. So unless 30 days have gone by or you've gotten an alert, you don't really need to do anything here. And you can see in some of the previous um, income butterflies that I've done where I think the hardest part of this trade is waiting the first 30 days without doing anything. And this is especially hard for some of the newer traders because you put this trade on, you're excited, you feel like you have to be doing something every single day, and guess what, you're not doing anything for the first 30 days. You're starting to wonder, am I doing this right? This feels wrong. I'm not, I have this trade on, I'm not doing anything about it. But this is the point. You want to put on a trade that doesn't require a lot of babysitting, doesn't require a lot of, adjusting and doing all these things. You put this on, you give it enough time, and we wait. In the first 30 days, what's going to happen is two things. Number one, your put debit spread that you're long is going to lose value. That's bad. But at the same time, you have a much wider put credit spread that's also going to lose value, and that's good. The net good is that your put credit spread is going to lose more than your put debit spread, right? You're short the credit spread, you're long the debit spread. Credit spread is going to lose more than the put debit spread, which will create a net positive P&L effect. Again, this software that I'm using, it doesn't account for future volatility. It doesn't know what volatility is going to do in the future. So it's just assuming that both put credit spread and put debit spread are going to lose value in the next 35 days. And as you can see here, where we are right now, 59.12, right? Theoretical value of this trade is going to be where my P&L is showing a gain of about $2,600. Is it going to be $2,600? I think in reality it isn't. It's going to be less, right? So this is pretty generous, but the idea is still the same, right? So the idea is that now we're down, right, about $600. But if we let 30, I don't know what's the closest to 30 here, right? If we let 30 days roll off the clock, the put debit spread is going to lose value, put credit spread is going to lose value. We should end up in a net positive P&L situation where then you would have to consider, is this enough? Am I taking this trade off? Am I doing something else to it? And I'm going to talk about that something else to it next. All right. So the idea is to hold it for the first 30 days, let DK do what it's going to do. And if you put this trade on when volatility is high, and if, we're just now looking at a volatility change effect, right? So looking at the P&L right now, which is minus about 400, maybe 500, maybe 600, and I'm going to start to drop volatility, right? Again, this is assuming that volatility in all options will fall by equal amounts, which doesn't really work that way in reality, but the idea is valid, right? If we take volatility down, you can see that just because volatility went down, P&L has gone up. So if you put this trade on when volatility is relatively high, if you put this trade on when volatility is relatively high, and then volatility falls, right? The natural decay of these two spreads is going to work in your favor, and you're going to get the benefit of volatility you want to call this collapse or volatility decrease, right? But as volatility falls, that's going to push your P&L higher. And as time goes, that's theta, right? Theta is the time decay. And then we're also short Vega. So if volatility falls and time passes, you get both theta and Vega working in your favor. So now, if let's say we're here, let's go 20 days into the future and we're kind of like sitting, or maybe here's, maybe this is a better example. So this is the other trade that I'm in right now. And I don't think that, this calls for any more adjustments. Why? Because, I do have positive delta. So if the market is going to run up, I'm going to benefit from positive delta. I do have positive theta, which means that as time goes, the longer I sit on this position, technically, right, I am net short premium in this trade. So as time goes, I should benefit from the time passage. And if volatility is going to revert, where's the volatility now? You can look at options volatility with 44 days. If the volatility comes in a couple of points, I'm going to get the reward for that as well. So I don't really need to do anything. But if for whatever reason, maybe the market started to break out, maybe there's, for whatever reason, right? If I wanted to um, increase my directional exposure while controlling my downside risk, one way I can do that is by changing the widths of the spreads of the put debit spread and the put credit spread. Again, my goal for this trade as far as risk goes is to stay under $50,000 on a 10 lot, right? So I don't want to exceed $50,000 Reg T margin in this trade. And whatever adjustments I'm going to make, maybe it's going to be a net credit adjustment, right? Where I'm collecting a credit. Maybe it's going to be a net debit adjustment, which is going to increase my margin. Whatever the case may be, I don't want to exceed, right, $50,000 Reg T margin. So let's say if I wanted to take in additional credit, increase my potential reward in the tail, right, or above my upper long, which is at 5,900 right now, I would just roll this 5,900 down maybe 10 points, right, to 5,890. So what happens here? If I roll the 5,900 down to 5,890, I will collect about $3 and maybe 30 cents, 10 contracts. So I will increase my tail profit by about $3,300. Right. So now my tail profit here goes to about $4,900 or $4,800. Where is my Reg T margin? It's just over that $50,000 mark that I'm looking for. Can I still do this adjustment? I can, right? I will be exceeding my Reg T by just about $100. So maybe if I wanted to stay under 50,000, I would also have to roll my downside long or lower long put from 5650. Maybe I'll roll it up 5 points. Right, and that will keep my Reg T margin under 50,000. Right, before it was 50,200. By rolling this lower long up 5 points, that cut my margin down to 45.8. Right, so I would move my long options in towards the structure or towards the center of this structure. I'm collecting a net credit, right? My margin is increasing a little bit, but it's still within that $50,000 um, capital allocation for this trade. You can see what it does to my Greeks, right? By collecting a credit, right? This is kind of like selling another put credit spread. I'm selling a more expensive put, right? Which is 5,900. It's currently going for 103. I'm selling a put for 103 and I'm buying a put for 99 or 100. So I'm collecting a credit. This is just like selling a put credit spread at Delta 47. Right? I'm rolling my upper long down 10 points to increase my tail risk, which is great. It's bringing in an additional $3,000 worth of premium. That's awesome. But what it also will do, it will slightly increase my downside risk. But more importantly, it will double my directional risk. Right? My delta goes from plus 10 to plus 20. So now I will potentially make or lose twice as much money for every 1 point worth of movement in the S&P 500. My gamma is about the same, but it will start to uh, make a difference if the underlying is pushing lower, which means my delta is going to be a little bit more sensitive to price movement on the way down, right? My losses are going to accumulate a little bit faster. Now, this is kind of a little maybe confusing to some, right? My theta went from 135. If I'm collecting a credit, how can my theta go down, right? But my theta goes from 130 to 115. I lose theta, not by much, but I definitely lose theta. But you would say, well, how are you losing theta if you are collecting a credit? We know that if I make a trade where I am collecting a premium, right, I'm taking in a credit, should my theta increase? If this was just a put credit spread, yes, you would add positive theta, but right, we're shrinking the width of this debit spread and this credit spread. We're giving up potential return inside the structure, and all of this theta, all of this 130 theta is happening inside of this structure, right? So if we're giving up some potential return inside of the structure, we are, in theory, we're giving up some of the theta. Do I really care about, having a theta of 130 or 115? Not really. I think delta is going to matter a lot more for this trade than theta. Again, I'm not playing for profits inside of this structure. I'm okay with price running up and then the market maybe going sideways, maybe up, down, maybe, not much movement, but I care about profits outside of the structure. I don't want to be anywhere near the structure, especially with little time until expiration. Right? This trade could very, very easily become a losing trade, right? If we just have a 1% down day and we are inside structure in the last couple of weeks. So I want to avoid the structure as much as possible, even where we are right now, right? Given there is still 45 or 44 days until expiration, I'm okay with holding this trade as the price is kind of dipping into this profit tent, right? But the closer we get to expiration, the more uncomfortable I will become with price inside this structure. I would rather price be outside of the structure. So I am not playing for profit potential inside the structure. I don't care about the size of this tent. If it's this big where the blue line is, or if it's this big where the green line is, it doesn't matter to me. I would rather grab this and stay as far away from this structure because my downside break even is not that far away. Right? So my goal is to stay as far away from the downside break even as possible and make as much as I can of this tail profit and get out of this trade. So now we just looked at this trade that has been already adjusted once. It didn't start as a all put condor. It also started off as a butterfly. And if you want to go back and see what I did with this trade, this is the trade ID 3067. Right, you can see how this trade was adjusted when it was adjusted. I think that we just made this adjustment like on December 30th. All I did was this was a butterfly, which means that it had like this it had this tent. It looked just like a butterfly would. And all I did was I chopped off this peak, right? And I spread the center up and down and collected a credit. So you can see that the market is moving around a little bit right now, and at the lows today, the trade was break even, and then as I was talking about it, we were up, and the trade was plus maybe a couple of $100, and now we're kind of pushing towards. We're kind of in the middle of today's range, not really going anywhere fast. So you can see this trade is still up just a couple of $100, but this trade is not really in trouble, and it doesn't really require a lot of attention. I can continue to hold it. Now I know that when do I need to do something? If we're inside the structure, and let's say if I'm going to stop out of this trade, if it's down $3,000, right? And this number, again, whatever number you're comfortable, that's your number. For me, for this trade on the $50,000 Reg T margin, $3,000 is kind of like, all right, you know what? This thing isn't working. It's getting away from me. Am I going to continue to fight it, or I'm just going to get out and kind of let the market settle in and continue with the next trade? That's my plan. It could be good plan. It could be bad plan. Your situation is not my situation, and vice versa. So you have to do what is best for you. But before we get to being down $3,000, what if this trade was down, maybe half that, $1,500? So I can say, all right, where is this trade down $1,500? This trade is down $1,500 at around 5,800 on the S&P. Right? So if we get to 5,800, I'm not quite at my stop, but things definitely aren't getting better. Maybe I need to do something, right? Maybe I'm going to bring in my delta hedge. And at 5,800, right, looking at the delta reading, at 5,800, this trade is plus 25 delta. Maybe at 5,800, when I'm down, $1,200, $1,300, $1,500, halfway to my stop, I'm going to bring in a delta hedge, and I'm going to maybe unload 2/3 of my delta. All right, my delta 25 divided by 3 times 2. Right, I want to get rid of about 15 or 16 deltas. I could buy another put debit spread, right, at around maybe delta 30, and get rid of some of my long delta just to kind of slow things down a little bit. You can see my T+0 is pushing lower, right, on the way down by introducing, and again, this isn't the point to make an adjustment right now, but I just want to show you how T+0 would change and what is my goal with this adjustment. So maybe I'll go to a delta 30. I'll buy 30 delta, and I'll sell 15 delta or something like that. -1, right? It changes my risk graph. As you can see, it's starting to look a little ugly. But my T+0 line, and I hope you can see this, right? So the blue line here, maybe this is a little bit easier to see, but this blue line here is my current T+0. And there's a green line. This is the proposed T+0 if I was to make an adjustment. As you can see, by bringing in this put debit spread, which is going to cost me a debit, But if we get to down to where I'm down halfway to my stop loss by bringing in a put debit spread, this is going to, right, reduce my delta, and it's going to make the T plus zero line a lot smoother on the way down, which means it's going to slow down the rate of losses on the way down, right? If I get halfway to my stop loss, I say, hold on, before I get out of this trade, let me see if I can bring in this, speed bump, kind of slow things down a little bit. I buy a put debit spread to cut my delta maybe by 2/3, maybe in half. It depends, how fast we're moving, but the idea is to reduce my directional exposure, to give myself some time. If the market is going to continue the following day lower, well, guess what? I can't control the price, but I control the rate of losses for my trade, right? So by bringing in that put debit spread, I'm going to slow down the rate of losses on the way down and wait and see maybe a day or two or however long, right? To see if the market's going to find some sort of balance and we're going to, go back up. If the market continues lower, I can always stop myself out. The good thing is that if the market continues lower, my rate of losses is going to be much lower because of that put debit spread, right? So these are kind of my guidelines or my rules for me, is that I know where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go out without a fight. So if the market is pushing against me and I'm kind of halfway to my stop, I'm going to try to bring in a put debit spread to slow things down, to see if we get a bounce and make a decision. It's a lot easier to make decisions when you don't have the rate of losses, where you need to make decisions really, really fast, or else, right? So I already know, when I need to get out of this trade. But between now and then, if the market is not working in my favor, if the market is pushing against me, I know that halfway to my stop loss, I'm going to bring in a put debit spread to slow things down a little bit, to kind of give me an idea and give me the time to see, what is the market going to do next. Maybe market's down for a day, 2, 3 days, and then it finds balance and then we go back up. I can always get rid of that put debit spread. I will probably have lost money on that put debit spread that I used to slow things down. So now I know I need to make further incremental adjustments to collect additional credit to compensate for what I just lost with that put debit spread. Right. So from there, we can go deeper into more complex ways to, the debits, the credits, how we're going to compensate for the hedges, and so on and so forth. And we'll talk about that perhaps in another meeting. I'm out of time here. I know Tom is going up next. I think he's going at 2:30. So hopefully I gave you guys something to think about. I know we talked a lot about a lot of things, and your feedback is what will help me understand what you don't understand and maybe give you what you need, rather than just kind of, talking broadly about this trade. So I'm going to jump here. If you have any questions, you can find me on Discord. Also, if you want to not just ask a quick question, because we do get good questions that get lost in the chat. So please do find a general forums channel and you can create a topic. Ask questions there. We can stay on topic, right? And this topic is easier to find later on by you or other members. And I think this is going to be a lot more, it's a way to keep things a lot more organized and easier to find later on, and more importantly, stay on topic. If we have 10 people talking at the same time about 10 different things, the general chat is kind of all over the place. So don't be shy, create topics, ask questions, and I will talk with you guys next time. Have a good rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.